Stuart Holbrook has spent his life in the world of collectors. As president of Theriault, the world's leader in the auction of antique dolls and figurative art for over 30 years, he's managed the often personal and always wild world of collecting and collectors. His market expertise and knowledge of trends comes to life in The Curious Collector, where he shares his experience and experiences in real-life stories, alongside sage advice on how to build great collections within the happy life of a collector.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Curious Collector. I am Stuart Holbrook, and with you today, coming from Houston, Texas. I've been deep in the heart of Texas here for a good week, and also in the fabulous state of Oklahoma, doing more of my doll talks to some of the clubs spread around. I did Dallas, and 3 clubs there came together last night, actually, and I think I didn't get them home till probably 11 p.m., most of them, because we were going late and having so much fun. Yeehaw, Texas style. It was great. And where else did I go? San Antonio, where, oh my gosh, the ladies there, had to be about 30 of them, set up a beautiful lunch table, and we all had fun talking for hours, and it was a great time. And Houston, the first Houston Doll Club, a huge shout out to you and Mia Grabowski, who opened her home. And on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, they still came out to hear me talk, and we had so much fun. Wonderful, interesting conversation I had as well with this woman who was there that's a part of the club that is from Spain, but living in Houston now. And her parents own the building that houses this amazing museum that I had never heard of, that she showed me pictures, incredible automatons and dolls. So really looking forward to getting over to Spain soon to go check this out as well. And then, oh, wow, the ladies of Tulsa. Tulsa was a surprisingly lovely little town. I've been there before, but never really spent any time there. And I happened to have a night and evening that I got there early enough that I was able to walk around the city a little bit. And very, very pleasant, neat and tidy city with wonderful little cafes and restaurants, and had a beautiful meal there as well. But the ladies the next day at this doll club talk, they were a hoot. They presented me with an official Tulsa cowboy hat that was adorned with all sorts of Tulsa things, including on the front of it, the symbol of Tulsa, which is this giant statue that's in the city that is the oddest thing I've ever seen. It is like a giant statue of an oil man and basically an oil worker working on the drills. And now it's weird because he looks kind of naked. And he's called, by the way, the Golden Digger. And they gave me the hat with this guy on the front of it that kind of looks naked. So I don't know. I love this hat, though. It is hilarious, and I'm taking it home. This thing I'm keeping forever, and I may have it in my office and wear it sometimes just for fun during the day, because it's quite the hat. You can see some of the pictures of these, and all the pictures, every doll club, we're doing group photos of the whole doll club so people can see the different collectors from around the country and kind of experience each day with me as I go from place to place, and see some of the funny photos they post in the comments as well. In the Tulsa one, you'll see some hilarious photos in there. They even made of course, as you know, you've listened to other podcasts, Jell-O mold is kind of my joke as far as doll club meetings. And so they, of course, brought back the Jell-O mold trend that started earlier this year when I began this. And they brought it back. They made a Kewpie Mountain Jell-O mold, adorned, surrounded by Kewpies. It was yet another Jell-O mold failure, let's call it, because the Kewpie Mountain Jell-O mold collapsed on the way over to the doll club presentation. So it was quite hilarious, and everyone has been just fantastic, so kind, so welcoming, and it's been just an incredible moment to be in all of these places, in these living rooms, in these event halls where I've been able to talk to all of you. And I've really missed it because so many of the auctions are online these days, and so many people bidding online, that I don't get to see a lot of collectors in person as much. And so this has been just absolutely invigorating for me as well to spend time with you and to give you a moment of validation in my talk of all the great things you are doing as collectors and the great news we have coming forward in the future of collecting. And thank you. And we've got a lot more to go. I think I'm only at, I don't know how many I've done, 20, 25 so far this year. And I think I've got another 40 or so to go. So a lot more road in front of me. But this weekend, I fly home. If you're listening to this right away, I fly home and we're doing a big auction event and then fly back to Houston, get in the beast, as I call it. That's my vehicle. And moving on down the road to Shreveport, Louisiana, and then heading up north to Chicago and across through some other East Coast locations. So we are going all the way to December. I am doing doll talks around the country, and it's great. And I want to tell you, it really inspired me. The other day, I was walking around San Antonio, and I was tired, and I'm tired today as well. But I felt really great about the experiences I was having, and I decided I'm going to put this into a book next year, probably, maybe later in the year when I calm down from all of this, and call it The Spirit of Collecting, My Tour Through America, and showing America through the eyes of collectors that I've met all over this country in so many different towns, in big cities and flyover towns and little remote areas, and just some of the stories of how collecting in America intersect in this beautiful story. So it will be something to look forward to maybe next year. I think I've got it in me. I think I'll have even more stories developing down the road. But we're here today to talk about something else, and it's an interesting subject. One that I think every collector faces this. So it meets the needs of every single person out there because we are all going to face a moment that's going to be centered around why some collectors stop collecting. Well, I guess I really should have called this, why do all collectors eventually stop collecting? Because everyone does. And there are multiple reasons, of course, why. And I want to go through some of these and kind of unpack the box of reasons why we stop collecting and give you some explanations, validate you that many times these reasons are legitimate and they are absolutely part of the process. Everything comes to an end at some point, and to give you the encouragement and the inspiration to try to understand the best ways and best path forward for building what I have said before in previous podcasts, the happy life of a collector. And that is you go right to the end. I like to call it paddles up. Now, this slogan was not invented by me, but actually by another collector who I adore in South Carolina. And it happened at an event. And this story is very sad, was very, very upsetting to me at the time, but has a really uplifting message and end to it in the sense of how collectors embraced it into a moment of positivity and utilized it as a encouragement to themselves and their own collecting and wanting the same in the end. Paddles up. How did this start? In 2023, we had the Sandy Kralowitz auction in Scottsdale, Arizona at the Camelback Marriott at our grand January event. Many flew in for this, drove in, came from all over the country, a few from overseas. And it was the big annual January auction we used to do that we still do, but from our gallery now, that was a real coming together. And one of the people that came is a collector, is a dear friend of mine for many, many years who I adored, knew her from when I was in my 20s and often had dropped by to visit her because she lived in Virginia and was a regional director of UFDC as well at one point, and just one of the kindest people you've ever met. And I used to sit in her living room often when I would drive by her house in Virginia to break bread and have conversations with her. Her name is Barbara Kincaid. And she came to this auction, and it was the first January auction she'd ever come to. And it also happened to be right after all of the COVID lockdowns, or it was kind of long after that, but certainly people have been traveling before, but a lot of people were still a little bit nervous. But now the world was opening up once again. So Barbara actually traveled for the first time since 2019. So it was a big, big, exciting moment for her to come back to the auctions and see old friends and attend this. So she flew from Virginia to Phoenix and came to Scottsdale to the event. And she had a wonderful time at the banquet on the Friday evening. And she was so happy, talking about how much this meant to her, that it was so wonderful to be with collectors again after mostly being in her home for a couple of years. And then came the next day to the auction, and she bid all day, and I can still see her. She always wore these kind of bedazzled baseball hats that were so funny. It was her signature look. And she was sitting there on the aisle. I can, in my mind's eye, still see her there. And she was buying away, having fun, bidding, laughing at the same jokes she's laughed at that I've been telling for 25 years. And the auction ended, and that day she walked out, paid for her purchases, walked back to her hotel room. And you can even hear me a little bit tearing up right now, even thinking about it, because it was a big moment for me. It was a terrible moment for me because this weekend is supposed to be one of joy and happiness, because she walked back to her room and unfortunately passed away on the way of a heart attack. And I was tasked with all of the contacting and all of the work that had to be done. And it was really a difficult moment for me emotionally. Not just that it was this weekend, but that Barbara was a friend, a dear friend. And I couldn't imagine the idea of anyone passing away at an event that was so uplifting and so wonderful and so joyful. And I was talking to some of the women there the next morning, and one of them said, and then everybody agreed, they all looked at me and they said, "Stuart, that's how we want to leave collecting, with our paddles up." And it was so moving to me. And they started this whole hashtag movement and this whole saying, paddles up, that they want to go exactly the same at an auction or an event or something to do with dolls, with their paddles up and having fun and laughing and doing the thing that they truly enjoy. And that has brought them so much passion and joy in their lives, in many cases, their entire lives. And so why not? And so I started thinking, there is something uplifting about it. And I know it tends to be a bit of a cliche over the years when you hear it in mountain climbers. They passed away climbing this one mountain they dreamed of. And you always hear they died doing what they love. And I kind of rolled my eyes at that over the years because I'm like, yeah, but I don't think they wanted to die. And clearly Barbara didn't. But there is a moment, and this one hit home for me, that I had to say, and maybe it was a way to help me process it as well. I had to say, she did. She went doing exactly what she loved the most. And that was being with doll people, being with collectors, collecting herself, engaging in the hobby. So I tell this story in the context of why people stop collecting, more so because I don't ever want you to stop collecting until that moment. I want you and hope for you to be paddles up right to the end. But people do stop for various reasons. And by going through some of these and unpacking them, maybe it can actually help and encourage you to see a path forward to continue on when some of these moments hit. That is, tips and ways to turn negativity that you may be feeling to collecting at this point in your life into positivity, and finding a new angle and a new approach that keeps you moving forward. And this is really important because the irony in all of this is I do believe that collecting for life, that is, to the bitter end, is actually going to keep you younger. And I do believe it helps you live longer, because you have passion, you have purpose. As Florence always says, 83 years old, and we've talked about this before, how does she do what she does? Get up every day, work 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, doing videos, cataloging, auctions, all of the things she does. How does she do it? And if you listen to my 3-part podcast interview with her, she tells you that every morning she wakes up and she thinks, oh gosh, can I just roll back over and go to sleep? And then she remembers that light switch turns on. But wait, I have something new to learn today. And that keeps her young and keeps her engaged and keeps her moving forward. So these are all lessons in why we should always aim, collect forever, right to the end. So why do people stop? Because they do. There's no question about it. And I have sat in living rooms all across the world and worked with collectors in this moment of where they're contemplating, thinking, should I sell? Is this the right time for me? I don't know. And I have absolutely acquired a sense, if you will, of knowing when a collector is talking about it or a collector is really serious about it. And I try to help them find that and identify it right away. And there are many times, and you might be actually surprised to hear this, but you would think that when I walk into a house and I'm sitting down with a collector and I'm engaging them as to their reason for selling and why they've chosen this moment, a lot of that is an opportunity for me to see, is there a path here that I can encourage them to keep going? You would imagine that I would say, do everything I could to tell them, yes, you want to sell now. No, I actually go in with the intent and the opportunity that can I save their collecting? Can I help them with a path forward? Can I make them see something differently? Because I do believe people are better off if they can keep going and doing something they're passionate about. And maybe it's just a little encouragement, a little something that can turn it all back on. And often it is. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there are underlying reasons and specifics that there is no way to turn this around. And I identify that typically very fast, and I know they're ready. And this is it. So I'm going to help you unpack some of these reasons so you can identify them maybe later on in your life. And could be 4 years from now, it could be 40 years from now that it happens. But there will always be a moment, an inflection moment within collecting with yourself that you will approach this perhaps. And this will help you with these points to know what they are and know that there are solutions in most of them. Well, except for the first one, and that is the obvious one, we die. And that there's I know that collectors out there have this belief, some of you, that one way or another, you are going to figure it out and you've got that U-Haul booked to go to heaven and you're bringing the dolls with you. But I'm here to tell you, I haven't seen it yet. I don't know why, but I feel like I'm talking with a Texas accent. I need to get out of Texas a little bit. I just noticed that in myself. But anyway, look, you're not going to get the U-Haul to heaven. The dolls are staying here, but remember, as I've always said, they are an extension of you. They are a story of you. They are, in a way, a preservation of your life that will be told through future generations. So you're not taking them with you, but they're not leaving and going away without you, if that makes sense. So we die. It happens. It's going to happen with all of us. And there was a time period, and let's call it the great accumulator age that I like to term, which was the 1960s to late 1990s. And these were the collectors that, as I mentioned before, have big homes and love to accumulate because of the Depression years they grew up in. They would have 2,000 or 3,000 dolls, and they often died in their homes. They lived to their late 70s, and they would always be the type that I remember sitting and talking with them, and they would say, the only way I'm leaving this house and my dolls is you're carrying me out. And that's it, period. And so they could do that, though, because they lived really only into their late 70s mostly, some a little later, but often that was the time frame. And they didn't get shuffled onto retirement homes, retirement communities, or living with their kids or any of this. I shouldn't use the word shuffle. I would say the necessity sometimes that living so long brings about in a collector. So with that, it was pretty easy. That was most of the collections. And I look back in the 90s and think about a lot of the big collections. And I'm going to say I haven't done the data yet to really analyze it, but I would say probably 80 to 90% of the collections back then were actually estate situations. And it could have been the kids, it could have been the husband, but the collector was gone. This was typical back in the day. As collecting evolved and we get into more of the modern age of the last, let's call it 30 years, we saw more things emerging, more reasons emerging as to why people stop collecting. And so we'll start off with the first one, which there's actually, let's call it collector burnout. Okay. Now there's two versions of this collector burnout. So this is version 1. So this is when a collector doesn't branch out. They kind of focus on one genre and they come to a realization that nothing comes into the market anymore that excites them. Now, you've heard me talk about this in The Road of a Collector Should Never Be Straight, and this is one of the exact reasons why. And I've used this example before. If you collect Kewpies for, say, 25 years, you're eventually going to hit a wall. And that wall will be your burnout because there's nothing left to excite, there's nothing left to hunt for, and you need that energy of pursuit. Without the elusive, without the joy of collecting, this wanes over time. And I've told the story of Lucy Morgan. This is one version of burning out, was also that you buy everything really fast. You get all the rare dolls because you have significant wealth, you have drive and energy. And so in 5 or 6 years, like Lucy Morgan, one day you realize there's nothing left that challenges you anymore. So this is an interesting burnout in the sense that it doesn't have to happen at all. And Lucy Morgan proved that because she sold her entire collection after 6 years and a year later started again because she said, I could have it all. I could have the challenge once more. The hunt has opened back up for me because I sold it all and I'm going to do it again. So that is the version that I find is very common in the sense of people get tunnel vision in their collecting. They don't branch out. And so ultimately, they find themselves, I hate to use the word bored, but I guess it's the right word. They find themselves just bored with collecting as nothing else out there is driving them forward. And that is all a product of A, getting too much too fast, or B, not expanding your horizons to try other areas within the genre that you can connect to and discover that will open up a whole new path for you to go down and continue on with this journey. So the version 2 of this collector burnout is when you overly specialize in this subject again. So let's take Kewpies, for example. And all of a sudden, a few people come into the market and totally dominate it. Now, you had been doing pretty well buying, and you have not hit that wall yet in your specialty of, I don't mean to pick on Kewpies, but we will. You've been doing pretty well, and there's still a lot of Kewpies out there that you want. You're really enjoying collecting. You're having a great time. And then 2 or 3 major high wealth buyers come into Kewpies all at once, and the market goes wild. And soon they are absorbing a lot of these pieces that you're trying to get, and you are left day after day as the underbidder. That is, you can't compete against them. And you start to feel like resentment in some cases. And I've seen this before. I remember a couple years ago, we were doing an auction. It was a specialty sale, and there was a collector who really focused on these pieces and specialized in them. And yet, at the time, a couple of major buyers were coming in and just literally, they were buying one after the other. And so they started to get resentment. And I remember they posted on Facebook something like, when will these people learn that you don't have to have everything? And I thought that was really interesting because that's not the way it works. Sometimes this happens. And what the issue of this collector not understanding is that part of the problem was that they had not branched out into other categories that interested them. They were so heavily focused on this one category that they were leaving themselves open to this moment, which won't last, because those people who are buying heavily like that typically are going to do the collector burnout one after a few years. And so they just need to be patient. While they're being patient, they need to collect other things, find another category. So the moral of these two collector burnout situations typically always rely on you just overly focused on one thing and you didn't allow yourself opportunity to find other areas to really delve into. So that's the number one reason why people burn out. Now, the next, as we unpack these different areas, the next one that happens, and this, I don't know if it necessarily turns into you're done collecting and sell your collection, but it certainly can turn into you're stopping to buy, thinking that if I stop and buy, it will solve the problem. But the reality is, if you stop buying, and I have noticed this over the years, collectors who stop buying but think they're going to keep their collection for 20 or 30 years from now, and they still love looking at the dolls. If you stop buying, if you stop engaging and challenging yourself in the market to find something new, you are done. You will not keep your collection for 20 to 30 years. Typically, within a couple of years, you're not engaged in the market. You begin to lose any sense of what's going on. You begin to kind of walk through your house and not even notice the dolls. I've talked to so many collectors who have said that's exactly what happened to me. I just stopped buying because, and here it is, I ran out of space. I had no more space. So I stopped getting any more new dolls. And then eventually it all just went away. The passion, the joy, the drive to keep going, it went away, and I figured, that's it. I'm just going to sell them. So I realize that space, and this is interesting in my doll talks around, I always ask people, what is your number one problem you have in collecting? And they all say it. I need more space, which in my previous podcast about husbands, I said, the greatest gift you can ever give a collector is buy them a warehouse or build them another house behind the one you have so they can put all their dolls in there. Space is the greatest gift to every collector. But there are solutions to this. And one of the things people are discovering and learning to do much better than they did in the great accumulator age, which they were the generation that never sold anything. Collectors today learn how to garden their collections. They learn how to move things out that they started with or that they bought and realized maybe it's not the best example, or maybe I could find a better one, or I moved into a new direction entirely. I don't really want these anymore. All of these factors do open up space. And that is the initial, ultimate, easiest solution, is just sell dolls out of your collection to build more open space to bring new dolls in. And ultimately, it should work well if you follow the guidance that I try to always tell collectors over your lifetime, is that a great collection, a really fabulous collection, typically goes down in size over the years and over the evolution and up in value. When you're in your 50s and 60s, you're buying, you're building, you're slowly gathering the dolls for your collection. And then in your 70s, you really start going wild. That's when people really are heavily into the active buying mode. And then it starts winding down. When it starts winding down, that's the point you want to make some space. You want to start moving things out that were the earlier purchases and start focusing in on, I'm going to sell 10 dolls and I'm going to replace it with one. And that alleviates the issue of space in your life and keeps you collecting for longer. The worst alternative is to say, I'm not going to sell anything. I have no more space. That's it. I'm going to just live with this collection right now as it is and no more buying. You are done as a collector. You'll be calling me or somebody else within a couple of years and saying, I'm done collecting. They're just too much to take care of now anymore, and I've lost my interest. You've got to keep engaged in the market, and space, making space and finding solutions for that are absolutely critical. Now, the next point is one that really makes me sad because there's no reason it should happen. Doll collecting should be the most positive experience in your life. This is not a job. This is not work. This is joy. And so I'm often saddened when I find out that a collector is selling their collection, done with collecting, because they were embroiled in some drama or were insulted by somebody regarding their dolls or their collecting or whatever. And oftentimes it's right here within our own community, which we should be lifting each other up. And as I always say, walking each other down the road. That drama coming into a trigger of collectors to quit collecting is so sad to me. It doesn't have to be that way. We need to be good to each other. And how does this drama form? It could be simple. It could just be that a friend walks up to you or whoever and says to them, why did you ever buy that? You really don't know what you're doing. Or you could have done a lot better than that doll. And it just so happens you love that doll. And you've been really proud of that doll. Or that's a terrible example. You should know better. Or you paid too much for that doll. Whatever. When I look at a collection, and I'm assessing a collection or helping a collector and talking about their different dolls, I don't go into a home to start talking down your dolls or telling you you can do better. I look for ways to challenge you to see new things. And I don't just start picking out dolls and saying, this is a terrible example. I can't believe you bought this. You need to get rid of it. No, because you may love that doll. But I've noticed this happens quite a bit through communities of doll collectors, and it really needs to stop. Let you do you. And most importantly, let's all let everybody do what they want to do and let them enjoy what they have and let them find their own path in collecting. And this is so important because this is what helps to lead people, as I said, down the road together in this joy of collecting and keeps them engaged in collecting for a lifetime. So the next one we come to, I call it instant enthusiasm. Now, this comes in many different forms. And these are the collectors who they come in fast and furious. They collect for a few years and then they're gone. And it's really an interesting one to me. And this one I actually see quite often and more recently have really seen it. And I'll explain why in a minute or two. But as I said, it comes in many forms. And one of the forms we've talked about earlier, and that is collectors come in with a lot of money and a lot of passion, instant enthusiasm combining with it. And they just buy up so fast that they burn out quickly. They've got it all. And so that's the obvious one that we've already discussed. But the one that really has fascinated me recently was one that is triggered by a black swan event, and in particular, COVID. What is happening around the world can affect sometimes collectors coming in huge amounts all at once, and many of them forming this out of instant enthusiasm within this particular situation that's happening in the world. And COVID was a really incredible one. When COVID hit and people started being home and more, as you know, everyone started doing all these crazy things. People were knitting and started gardening more. And I remember reading the story of this company in China that does seeds for gardens, that they were shipping and people were getting all of these seeds delivered to their doorstep. And it started to become a scandal of like, these seeds are being shipped from China and nobody knows where they're coming from. They're just dropping on doors all over America and they couldn't figure out, and it became a mystery. And then finally, one journalist, investigative reporter, started really digging in to figure out what happened. And it was the most ridiculous thing. People were ordering so much during that time. This company was backlogged about 6 months on these seeds. And they would order a bunch of gardening seeds. They would forget about it afterwards because they were 50 cents a bag or whatever. They'd forget about it. And 6 months later, they would be dropped on their door and they didn't even remember ordering them. And they started reporting these to police. And then the story started to break and everybody said, yeah, I got them too. I don't know where they're from. And it became this drama that in actuality, everybody had ordered them. They just forgot. That's what COVID was like. And this really connected into dolls in a huge fashion. We saw more new people coming into collecting in late 2020 and through 2021, and it really lasted right up into 2023. We saw more people coming into collecting than we've ever seen in the past, all at once. And it created this trigger in a market that we saw a spike in the market. We saw a lot of the more common dolls that had been a bit languishing due to many factors I've talked about in the past, like eBay making transparency to the idea of how common many of them are, the great accumulators dying and rolling out into the market in masses, that they had been languishing in the market. And suddenly in COVID, oh my gosh, we were getting $150 for a BILO instead of $25 to $50. And it was all COVID driven. And so people were just buying up dolls and getting into it quickly. A lot of them stayed and a lot of them are still collecting, but a number of them as well. It was so fascinating. In 2024, I had a number of collections coming in of people I started collecting in COVID. I was bored. I thought this was an interesting topic. I got into it, but now I'm really busy again in my life. I just don't have time. And I guess I don't really have it in me to be a collector. That was really a turning point for me into understanding that instant enthusiasm can come in many forms. And we'd never had something like COVID before that did this, that created this instant enthusiasm. So something to watch out for in the future. If we ever have a moment like this again, don't go out buying seeds like crazy. Buy dolls, though. It's okay. Anyway, the next one, and this is something that has become really prevalent today, and that is we are all living so damn long. A lot of people are, and bless you, let's hope it for everybody. But this comes sometimes with life choices, difficulties that you have to expect if you are a collector. Call it a bittersweet aspect of living longer in the sense that you often nowadays are not staying in your home. You're not like the great accumulators that just pretty much realized and knew that that's the home they would die in. This is becoming a situation where you're living to your late 80s, your 90s. I was in a living room in Australia working with a collector who was cognizant, totally great, seemed to be all right. She was 108 years old, but she had outlived, at 108, you're outliving everything. She had outlived the ability to stay in her large house. And so she had to sell her collection. This is a real thing that I am dealing with every day. And I talk about how the vast majority of collections, and I think 80 to 90%, I said, in the 90s were estate situations dealing with the family. I would say that number has, in some cases, almost flipped. I would say we're up to about 60 to 70% now that I am getting directly from collectors who have outlived their collections. And I got to believe, too, that part of the reason why everybody's living so long is they're collecting more passionately now than ever before. And I told you before, collecting keeps you young. It keeps you engaged. It keeps you moving. So this is great. I love this, but it comes with this challenge. What happens? You're 92 years old. You're in a 4,000, 5,000 square foot house. And I know a few collectors right now that are facing this decision, and they know they're reaching the point they have to start thinking about something. They've got to make some plans, especially if they have 1,000, 1,500 dolls throughout the house. What are they going to do? They're going to eventually have to go into a retirement assisted living. And this is an inflection point, again, in your collecting of how do you do it? So one of the advantages, I guess, to collectors and why we're seeing a lot of the market and collectors moving into smaller dolls is that if you have a collection of small dolls, it's pretty easy to move them with you. And I talked about the collector in Atlanta, I think in a previous podcast episode, who lived in a fabulous large house in the Buckhead section of Atlanta. and had to move as they aged and got into their late 80s, had to move into a 2-bedroom apartment, retirement high-rise building in Atlanta. And with that, she was able to take her whole collection. And you're wondering, how is that even possible? And we're talking like 600, 700 pieces. How do you get 600 or 700 dolls into a small high-rise building in a 2-bedroom apartment? Well, it just so happens that everything she collected was under 12 inches. And a lot of them were mignonettes. And they fit into literally 2 large cases that sit right in her living room. So this is an advantage you certainly have with smaller dolls and why I think people are migrating to that is they know the reality being that later on in life, they'll be able to take that collection with them. But for a lot of collectors, age affects your ability to collect in the sense that you can't take them to your next destination. That could be a retirement apartment. It could be your kids' homes, and they're like, please don't bring the dolls. A number of different places that you could be going to. And so age is the one that I'm seeing day in and day out every week in my work of meeting with collectors in trying to make this decision. And sometimes they can take some, but not all. Sometimes they can't take any. And so we're seeing this and we're trying to turn it into a positive for people. And, there is a positive in why you stop collecting and sell your collection while you are alive and still active is you have an ability in this to actually guide the next stages of your collection. That is, select where you want it to go. That is, select if you choose to have it auctioned, you can choose the color of the catalog. You can choose the title of the catalog that you like the best. You can choose which doll you want to have on the cover. There are a number of different advantages to this, and you get the joy and the validation of seeing people going after them. And then that relief you feel in the end, too, because every collector's greatest fear is that you'll go and your family won't take care of them or sell them properly, and they'll just be in the backyard in a garage sale. And I guess I wouldn't be in your backyard, but you get the point. Keep in mind as well that sometimes you are living so long that you're actually staying in your home, but there may be mobility issues or something related to the fact that you're kind of in one section of your home. And I know one collection like this where the dolls are on a 3rd floor. And so you're not really going up to see them anymore. And, a collection is like a garden. It needs tending to. And so collectors come to the realization that they're not moving, but they can't take care of the dolls like they used to. And they're concerned about long-term deterioration or other factors which could come from not properly maintaining your dolls. And the fact that you just can't even enjoy them. They're up there, but you can't see them anymore. And you just feel, what's the point? Oh, I know a few collectors that they couldn't even get to the room anymore to see them, but they said, I know they're there. That's all I need. I know they're there. One collector, it's one of the most beautiful things I think I ever experienced in my life was a collector in her 90s who lost her sight, but she was staying in her home and she had care in her home. And she said, I can't see the dolls anymore, but I know they're there. And occasionally I can still go over and I can feel one and I know exactly which one it is. And that reassures me. And so now that is a collector for life. And that is a beautiful story that should inspire you in many ways to say, all right, I may live a long time, but I'm going to keep finding angles and ways to keep that collection going. So the next one, and this is the most painful in my work to witness and deal with, and the one that I struggle with, and I hate the phone calls when they come. And that is, you are selling your collection and getting out of collecting because of financial reasons. And this was really a thing around 2010, 2009, 2010. And this was in the heart of the financial crisis. And I was going, it seemed, from one home to the next. You can't imagine what it's like to have to pack a collection out of a home where they were losing their house and they had to sell everything. It's an awful thing. It's a terrible thing that you have to go through. And I do not wish this on anyone. But I do want to say this. The interesting part of this is that though it was a painful thing for them, in the end, many of them said, thank goodness I spent my money on something like this that I could sell and I could raise money later on. And when I needed it the most. Because see, dolls, no, they're not a stock. You're not going to just call your broker and sell everything and cash out and raise money that way. But it is a liquid asset to a certain extent. If you had to do it in days, you could. You probably won't make as much, but you could. But with a few months, you typically can raise cash fairly quickly with your collection. And so it can actually save you in many cases. And I've seen this before where it has saved people and given them an opportunity to start over again. If you spent your money on Louis Vuitton bags over the years, well, I guess there is a market for Louis Vuitton bags in the second. So that was a terrible one to start with. Okay, let's do this. If you spent your money taking expensive cruises for the last 20 years, you're not in a financial downturn or a situation where you need to raise money. You're not going to sell the photographs of your 20 years of traveling out there and raise money on that. So the nice thing for people is in collecting, it's a terrible thing to have to go through, but thank goodness you have them and are able to raise cash in that manner. And it's so funny because a lot of spouses of collectors think that, well, I don't know if you should be sinking all this money into the dolls, you're spending so much. What if something happens and you can't sell these things again like this? And they're always shocked in these situations when they find out that, oh, they did really well in selling these dolls later on. Now, they may not have been what you paid for them. They could be and often are less, but they were liquid. You were able to get something out of it. And so the financial area of this and the difficulties that some people experience in their life may be sad, but there is an upside in this, a silver lining, and that at least it's there and at least you can sell them. So the next one is one that I don't know. There are some people who are introverted. I get it. There are some people who don't need community. They don't need a sense of validation from others. They don't need to share their collections. They don't need to socialize. They don't need doll clubs. They don't need doll conventions. And the interesting thing is I don't get to talk to them that much because they are so introverted. They really don't have conversations with me like most collectors do. And I always wonder how collecting is. I'd love to talk to a few of them to see, how do you do this? How do you keep collecting for all these years without community? Because I think lack of community is a very significant trigger to some people stopping collecting. And you see it a lot of times if you tend to, let's say, outlive a lot of your doll friends that you've had over the years, and you look around and you realize, I don't have any more friends collecting that I know. Everyone else is younger. They're new collectors. They don't get me. And I always think that's so sad because that ends up often leading them into just selling their collection because the spark is gone. They don't have their buddies out there to enjoy it with. Because I do believe that collecting is a community activity. It requires a sense of community. And it's why I say UFDC is such a vitally important organization in the process of encouraging, developing, and supporting communities across the world of collectors where they can share and talk together. You see it sometimes with doll clubs that disband because there's so few members. People move away. It's just in that one particular area. Maybe there's not a lot of new collectors developing. And so the club disbands. And then the one collector who's still kind of enthusiastic, or the two or three, they're kind of left homeless almost. And maybe they live in Billings, Montana, and there's no other club. And so they tend to kind of lose their community entirely. And with that, I've seen it many times happen that they lose their lust for collecting as well in that process. So what I would say is there is one solution, and it's a decent one out there today, and why we need to not say, I only want my community to be in person, local, and right here. I want to be able to go have tea with them. And these are all great things, and you should. But it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always work out over the long run. So open your mind to engaging a little bit online and finding people who may live in Italy or in Canada or in Japan that you meet, or even down the road 150 miles that you're not going to see that often. Find ways online to engage them, talk with them, and build a little community there that you can enjoy. And I love some of the Facebook groups that have popped up. The Simon and Halbig Collectors Group is really great on Facebook, where you can build a sense of community within there. But don't forget, no drama, because the drama is what drives collectors away. And social media, the downside of this, it makes drama a lot more accessible to people to say things they probably wouldn't say in person. And as such, you've got to really maintain composure and decency to each other in this sense. But you can find community there as well. The bottom line being, if you are not an introvert, and if you enjoy community, you have a lot of opportunities out there. And if you want to have that happy life of a collector and go all the way paddles up, you can find communities in many forms now out there in the world, all over the world. And so if you look around and you feel like, I don't have my community here, my doll club anymore, there are other paths out there if you choose to continue on collecting, and I want you to. Finally, sometimes I notice, and this is often, that a collector has lost a little bit of the zest for collecting, but they're not quite there at the selling point yet. Maybe the particular category that they have been collecting, the particular thing, is really hot in the market. And so there happens to be kind of a combined moment of, I'm not really active buying. And as a matter of fact, I'm kind of getting priced out of the market in what I really love, which I told you before, the solution for that is find a new category. And I also see an opportunity to sell my items at an upside in the market. So I think I'm going to take advantage of that. Now, this is a really difficult one to talk to the collector about, because I want to encourage them that A, markets shift all the time, B, you can find something new to do, and C, are you really sure once you sell this collection, that collection is gone? I mean, it extends on from you. It does have your stories. It does have your name, but are you absolutely positive? And so I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, other than I have often found that collectors know when that moment's there. They know when they're ready. They may still like the dolls. They still look in their cabinets. They still have doll friends, but it's not quite what it was before for them, and they see opportunity out there to sell them at an upside of a market. But be careful. Many of these collectors I've seen do this, where they sell their collection at this moment and they do very well with their collection. A few years later, they start all over again. They're actually my favorite kind of customers. That is actually the beauty of collecting. Remember this, if there's ever a moment where you stop collecting, you sell your collection, you can come back. There is no rule book out there that says, oh, that's it, I sold my collection, they'll never let me back in. I'll welcome you with open arms, believe me, as one person. You can do it, many have. So those are many of the reasons why people stop collecting over their lifetime. And my encouragement to all of you is keep those paddles up right to the end and keep going, keep collecting. It keeps you young. It's a hobby filled with joy and friendships and adventures and stories that don't have to end. That road is endless if you choose to keep driving on it. So put the car in gear, pedal to the metal, get out on that highway of collecting, and don't stop along the way. You're going to have a blast. You're going to have the happy life of a collector. And I hope that for all of you in this incredible journey in whatever it is that excites you every day in collecting, that you enjoy looking at and telling the stories of.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Curious Collector. The Curious Collector is hosted by Stuart Holbrook and produced by Tammy Theriault. We invite you to follow us on social media and feel free to leave any questions you have for Stuart on Facebook at Stuart Holbrook-Theriault or follow the Theriault Company Facebook page. And you can stay up to date with the latest auctions and events at Theriaults.com. We'll talk to you on the next episode of The Curious Collector.